class? Today we'll be talking about the Battle of Gettysburg, which is one of the two main battles that happened during the Civil War. Before we get into the battle itself, we're going to start with the do now. The do now is what events led to the Civil War and what event inevitably started the war. Pause the video right now, take a couple minutes to answer this question in your journal, and then unpause the video. Robert E. Lee. He was an American general known for commanding the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia. Interesting enough, he was actually asked by Lincoln to be the leader of the Union Army, but he turned it down because he chose to side with his home state of Virginia when they seceded from the Union in April 1861. Overall, he would have rather had the Union stay intact, but he knew this wasn't a possibility at the time. He was a very shrewd tactician and battlefield commander. He won most of his battles against far superior Union armies. One of these wins was actually on May 1863, where he scored a major victory over the Army of the Potomac in Chancellorsville. He was so confident after this victory that he decided to go on the offensive and attack the North. He was confident, which drove him to be on the offensive, but he also knew that his army needed supplies, so he couldn't just wait there and let the North attack them, because if they did, he wouldn't be able to hold out. He also knew that the South needed a break. They needed him taking the offensive allowed the South to regroup and recuperate. The first time they attacked the North, which we've talked about, was at the Battle of Antietam last year. If you guys don't remember, it was the city I talked about that was on the river, and it was where the Union actually claimed a victory. I always say claimed just because I don't totally believe that they claimed the victory, mostly because they could have devastated the Confederate Army if only they chose to take advantage of their position. Joseph Hooker. He was a career United States Army officer, achieving the rank of Major General in the Union Army. He was actually the one who was defeated by Robert E. Lee at Chancellorsville. This defeat affected Hooker in the sense that he didn't really think he could take on Lee again, which is actually how Lincoln felt. Lincoln also didn't think Hooker could take on Lee again, so they kind of came to a mutual understanding in which Hooker would step down and Lincoln would find someone else to take his place against Lee. George Gordon Meade. He was part of the United States Army as an officer and was also a civil engineer. During the Civil War, he rose to the rank of Union General. George Gordon Meade was the one that Lincoln chose to replace Hooker in going against Lee. The first order Meade had as leader of the Union Army was a little bit conflicting to him, because he knew that his army had to be in between Lee and in between the capital, Washington, D.C., but he didn't know if being in between these two in defending the capital, he didn't know if it would leave his army to be vulnerable for attack. So his first order was for his troops to pursue Lee's 75,000 strong army, which by this time had already crossed Potomac River and was headed into southern Pennsylvania. So he decided to not allow his forces to be vulnerable and just to attack Meade head on instead of waiting for him to come. The Battle of Gettysburg begins. Lee was positioned at Cashtown trying to gather his full forces. Lee didn't have Hill with him yet, so he was missing some of his troops. So he actually had a standing order that told his troops not to attack until everyone was gathered, because he knew if the Union attacked him at this point, he wouldn't be able to attack or defend properly. He sent a couple of his Confederate divisions to Gettysburg on June 31st to look for supplies. This division thought they saw just militia, Union militia, but they were mistaken. This was actually Buford's land cavalry. So Lee thought these were just regular militia, so he decided to fight them. He didn't know it was Buford's land cavalry. Buford was actually winning against Lee, but then Lee's full forces came, which caused Buford to be pushed back. They got pushed back all the way to Cemetery Hill when John Reynolds, a general of the Union, got killed. He got killed almost immediately joining the battle. And this drove his troops to lose morale, so they weren't confident that they could win anymore, which caused them to be pushed all the way back to Cemetery Hill. Lee wanted to take this advantage of them being on the defensive, and he wanted to attack Cemetery Hill. He gave the order to Richard Ewell, but Ewell declined the order because he knew they were on the defensive, but he thought the Union Army's position at Cemetery Hill was too strong. If he attacked, he wasn't fully confident that he could take them on. He was partially right, because by dusk, Winfield Scott had arrived and was followed by 3 Union corps to strengthen the defenses. So if Ewell actually would have taken the order, he might have been able to take out the Union army that was at Cemetery Hill. But if it took him too long, Winfield Scott would have been there, and Ewell's troops would have been the ones that were getting destroyed. This is just a little pause in the presentation. I basically want to know what you guys are thinking right now. So I want you guys to answer these 2 questions. Do you think that Ewell declining the order was the right choice? Why or why not? What do you think would have happened if Ewell accepted the order? Just answer these 2 questions, pause the video, go to your notebook, write your answers down, and then unpause the video. The Battle of Gettysburg, second day. By the second day, the Union Army has established strong positions from Culp's Hill to Big Round Top. Lee analyzed his enemy's position and went against the defensive advisement of his second-in-command. Lee ordered Longstreet, Ewell to attack the Union from the left and the right. These orders were supposed to be followed as early as possible, but the attack did not happen till 4. The reason that the attack did not happen till 4 was actually for a couple reasons. Because one was that the terrain in which Ewell and Longstreet's troop had to go, it was very rough. So it actually took the troops a lot longer than expected to get through and to get into position. The second reason was because of lack of communication. Not everyone knew exactly where they were supposed to be at exactly what time, and they didn't know exactly what they were supposed to do. They just knew They knew generally what they were supposed to be doing. But because of the lack of the communication, no one knew for sure what was supposed to be done, which caused them to be delayed. A lot of bloody fighting happened across Sickles' line. Sickles was a Union general, and he made a stupid mistake in trying to change his position from Cemetery Hill because he thought he saw a better one. As soon as he left his position, he was dual flanked by the Confederates and was immediately at a disadvantage. This actually forced Meade to send troops to help him, because if Meade didn't send troops, Sickles' whole militia was just going to be decimated. The saving grace of the day was a Minnesota regiment that was able to hold Little Round Top in name of the Union, but they did have heavy losses because they lost the territory of Devil's Den, Orchard, and Field. At the end of the day, there were 9,000 or more casualties from both sides. The Battle of Gettysburg, Day 3. Union forces pushed back the Confederate threat against Culp's Hill, and after hours of fighting, the Union regained their position. Lee believed that he was close to victory that day, the day before, so he decided to send 3 divisions against the Union center on Cemetery Ridge. Lee believed that he was close to victory because he had a 2-hour cannonade against the Union. So he basically fired cannons at them for 2 hours to try to weaken their line. The Union did not fire back. The reason they did not fire back was not because they were being weakened, was because they were trying to conserve their ammo. Lee took this as, oh, they're weakening because they're not shooting back. This is the perfect time to attack. He sent 15,000 troops led by Pickett across an open field to attack the Union. Lee's second-in-command, Longstreet, protested, which was right because the Union wasn't weakened. They were just conserving ammo. But Lee didn't listen to Longstreet, and he still went along with Pickett's charge. This caused the Confederates to be massacred because they were literally running across an open field against a Union line that was never weakened and that had plenty of ammunition because they conserved it during the 2-hour cannonade by Lee. They just shot cannons at all of the troops, and since it was an open field, it was really easy to aim and very easy to take out multiple targets in one shot. The Confederates were caught from all sides by the Union troops because even the troops themselves were hiding behind stone walls. They would shoot at the Confederates, reload, shoot again. So they were basically undercover the entire time. The Union had every advantage, and the Confederates were just massacred. Barely half of the Confederates actually survived this battle, so that means 7,500 at the least died, because Lee assumed that since they weren't firing, they were weakening. Since they weren't firing, the Union was weakened. Battle of Gettysburg aftermath. The loss of Pickett's charge basically showed Lee that there was no way he was going to have victorious invasion of the North, and he waited for a counterattack, but it never came. This is mostly because Meade decided that it wouldn't really be a smart choice to attack, since he didn't really know if there was more soldiers, and he didn't know if they were already prepared for this. He pulled his troops back in the dead of night and in the cover of rain back to Virginia. After this devastating loss, Meade was partially criticized for not following them because they thought they could completely decimate the Confederate army if they would have followed them, but Meade didn't know what would have happened. Meade didn't know, like I said before, if there was a counterattack. Meade didn't know if there was more troops waiting for him, so he decided to take it safe. In total, the Battle of Gettysburg had a death toll of about 50,000, which made it the bloodiest battle in the entire war. The battle was one of two that turned the tide of the war in favor of the Union. We've already talked about the other one. It was at Vicksburg, Mississippi, where a great siege occurred. We'll continue to talk about it, and I'll continue to reinforce it just because it was one of the two main battles of the Civil War. The Gettysburg Address. This address was given months after the battle by the President of the United States at the time, Abraham Lincoln. This address did a couple things. One, it actually dedicated the battlefield as a national cemetery. It also was made in respect of everyone who lost their lives during the Battle of Gettysburg. So it was his way of paying tribute to them. I've included a link to this Gettysburg Address. It's very short. It's just the bold words right here, and you'll see different copies of it, but these are just because we don't know which one was really said. Because it wasn't exactly, we don't have the original notes in which Lincoln was reading. So these were like people who actually wrote it down themselves after they heard it. They're not very different from each other. They're quite really the same. There's just few differences. But yeah, just read these, take a few notes, show me what you think about. Like, what are you thinking when you're reading this speech? Because it was a pretty good morale boosting speech, because it was talking about how we shouldn't let the people die in vain. Like, don't let their sacrifice be for naught. Actually come out, actually fight. Make sure that what they believed in actually comes true. It's a really good speech, and it's so short. So yeah, just read this, take some notes, definitely answer every other question that was in the presentation. And we'll be talking about it tomorrow, and we'll be doing some more engaging activities that will talk more in depth about the Battle of Gettysburg. Thank you for your time. Have a nice day.